ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੱਟ ਦੀਆਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ। ਮੈਂ ਦਵਿੰਦਰ ਤੂਰ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਮਾਰਟਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਣਗੇ, ਜੋ ਕਿ NDP ਦੇ ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਨਾਰਥ ਤੋਂ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਵੀ ਨੇ। ਕਾਫੀ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੋਂ NDP ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ NDP ਦੀ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦੀ ਰੇਸ ਵੀ ਲੜੀ ਸੀ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਆਓ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰੀਏ। Mr. Martin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Paji. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal ji. So let's start from getting to know yourself. Tell us something about your political career and about yourself.
So what it is right now, as you know, I'm the NDP candidate in the riding in Brampton North. And how this came to be about, it's a bit of a long journey. I joined the New Democratic Party back in 1996, 1997. And from then until just a few years ago, I mostly worked as an activist, helping other people with their campaigns. And then with the very tragic passing of our late leader, Jack Layton, there was a group of people who came around me and they said, you know, Martin, as a business person, you know, you may have something different to offer the New Democratic Party. And so we'd be interested in having you run as a leadership candidate. And I said, okay, that's very interesting. Let me think about that for a bit. And then I came back to them. I said, would you be willing to help me build a national team in order to make that work? And they said that they would. And so that was a fantastic experience. And then out of that, the New Democratic Party remained in contact with me, and I remained a member. And they said, we'd be interested in having you run in the next federal election. And that is how I came to be the nominated candidate in Brampton North.
So how can you differentiate the working under late Jack Layton or Tom Mulcair as a leader of NDP?
Both were very inspirational leaders, Paji. I should say also, too, is that the NDP is a party that's very committed to its principles and to its policies. And as a result of that, you do see some similarities. As an example, in 2011, Jack Layton ran under a promise to reduce the small business tax from 11% to 9% at the federal level, because he recognized, in the same way that Tom recognizes, the fact that small businesses create 80% of the jobs in Canada. And so we've been pushing for that one. And Tom Mulcair has been highlighting that one on the tour that he's been doing recently in Southern Ontario. Similarly, the New Democratic Party under both leaders was very committed to affordable childcare. And so we've started to put some details around that one for this current federal campaign, where Tom Mulcair has come forward with a $15 a day daycare program. And this policy is particularly important for us here in Brampton, because in Brampton we have the highest childcare costs in the entire country. And so certainly the program would the childcare program would benefit everyone right across the country, but in Brampton we'll see a particular benefit just because it will reduce the cost of living and the costs that parents face when trying to get childcare for their children.
But can we afford that kind of expensive childcare all over Canada?
Absolutely we can. So what it is, a universal childcare program was first pioneered in Quebec some years ago. They started first, if I remember correctly, at $5 a day and then at $7 a day. And they realized through the implementation of their program that that was too low, that it was not sustainable at that price. And so they did their own investigation. We did our own investigation. The economists that we consulted with said that it is sustainable at $15 a day. And that's what, if I understand correctly, that's what the Quebec government is also deciding to move to as well. And so your $15 a day daycare is sustainable. The reason why it's sustainable is because the $15 a day helps offset, of course, the cost of the program itself. But what happens is that the childcare program exists certainly as a social justice program, but it's also an economic program. We know that in Quebec, when it was implemented, we had 70,000 people who previously were not working rejoin the workforce. And so when you scale that up across Canada, you'll have many, many people who are currently receiving benefits from the government, who will then be taxpayers paying into the system. And that is how the program overall becomes affordable at that price.
Mr. Singh, as you know, we just had an election in Alberta, like provincial elections, and NDP formed the government. They got a clear majority, and what they brought is they're pledged to raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2018. We just had a poll, and about 80% of small businesses are too worried about that. They don't believe that this policy will help the small business. As a small business owner, I think you own a lot of small businesses, like a lot of pharmacies. How you feel about raising the minimum wage from $10 to $15 within a small period of time will help the small businesses?
So at the federal level, the rules here apply a bit differently, Paji. It's important to keep in mind that the $15 hourly minimum wage that's being advocated by Tom Mulcair exists only at the federal level. And so small business owners generally across the country, for the most part, are not impacted. You would have workers, for example, at the airport, which is not in my riding, Pearson International Airport. These are the types of employees that would be impacted by this particular plan. Nonetheless, what we want to do is we want to make sure that people are actually able to afford to live. And so that's the goal of the New Democratic Party. We have programs in place, as I mentioned, the child care program, which reduces the cost of living. And then we also want to help them on the revenue side, whether it's helping them find jobs in the first place by reducing the small business tax, or alternatively making sure that they have a living wage by which they're able to afford those things that they need.
As you mentioned that some of the policies, when you talk about Brampton or Ontario or Quebec, they might help that end of Canada. But when it comes to representing all over Canada, especially Alberta, when NDP policies, when it comes to pipelines or when it comes to how to deal with the economy, are a little bit contradictory, you think as a federal government, when you guys will form the government, you can appeal to all over Canada, not be limited to Ontario and Quebec only?
I think that we already appeal all over Canada, Paji. I think that's reflected in the fact that if you're looking at the polling numbers, you will see that the NDP leads or is near to leading in each and every single area. There is in every single region across Canada. There's no other political party that can make that claim. In addition, what we have with the New Democratic Party is a commitment to a diversified economy. And so we do recognize the importance of the oil and gas economy as it exists in Alberta and also in Saskatchewan. But we also recognize the importance of focusing on the manufacturing sector too here in Quebec and Ontario. If we look at this in contrast to what the Conservatives have done, you'll see a stark difference. About 2 years ago, the Conservatives implemented a plan to spend $200 million in the manufacturing sector here in Ontario. And on the face of it, Budgie, that would sound very good. However, we learned as of about 5 months ago through an article in the Globe and Mail that the Conservatives have indeed spent not even one penny of that $200 million to try to generate any jobs. And so what we have is a situation here whereby they are doing a lot of talk but not doing a lot of walk, meaning that they're not putting the plans into action that people need in order to generate good quality, high-paying jobs. In addition to that, the New Democratic Party is very concerned about infrastructure spending. They want to make sure that there's a stable source of cash flow for the municipalities across Canada to be able to rely on for planning infrastructure projects. Specifically, what we're looking at doing is transferring 1 cent of the gas tax from the federal side to the municipal side each and every single year. In the GTA alone, this will result in $90 million. This has a benefit in 2 ways. The first way is that it helps people in their regular daily lives to make sure that they're not stuck in traffic and they have a good commute. But also too, Paji, having a good quality infrastructure is helpful for the economy as it allows us to get our manufactured goods to market in a timely and a cost-effective manner.
So when it comes to economy, I think Conservative Party of Canada, present government, always boast that they are the one who can get more votes when it comes to economy. We do know that the budget is coming soon. You still believe that this party or this government can balance the budget and it will help them, and NDP might run behind the polls because of that?
I can tell you, Paji, in fact, this particular Conservative government and other Conservative and Liberal governments that have come before them do not have a particularly good track record on running the economy. If we look at the statistics, and these are not NDP statistics, but statistics from the Department of Finance, we see clearly in the numbers that New Democrats, when they form government, have the highest percent chance rate of having balanced budgets. Tommy Douglas alone, when he was Premier of the province of Saskatchewan, implemented the Medicare system and had balanced budgets 17 years in a row. This is a really important point to note. Also, too, when we look at the current Conservative government, what we have is a situation whereby they haven't run balanced budgets at all. They claim to have a balanced budget in this current year, but recently the parliamentary budgetary officer has come forward and said that in fact the budget will not be balanced. And it's because the Conservative Party has taken its eye off of the economy. They lack the ability to preserve a diversified economy, and they're not focused on job creation as they should be. The NDP has strengths in both of these areas, and we will exercise those strengths.
Senate reforms or Senate scandals can be the part of the coming election that some parties will use it. Last week, I think your party leader came forward and said that if NDP forms a government, they will abolish the Senate. I want to remind you that before a few months ago, Supreme Court of Canada already made a statement about that it's not up to the federal government. Federal government cannot reform or abolish the Senate. When it's not within the hands of the federal government, why political parties like NDP, Liberals, or Conservative Party of Canada are making statements like this?
So, Paji, on this particular issue, there's a couple different sides here. First of all, the New Democratic Party has been advocating for abolition of the Senate, not just under Tom Mulcair's leadership, but for years. If I'm not mistaken, maybe even decades. And so it's a long-standing policy that we've had in the Democratic Party, and we stand by it. What it is with the Senate is that there are things that we can do. First of all, we can reduce the budget as much as we possibly can so that there's less waste and there's a less opportunity for Conservative and Liberal senators to mismanage taxpayers' dollars as they have done so many times in the past. In addition, you are quite right that we need the cooperation of the provinces in that regard, but cooperation of the provinces is starting to happen, not least of which we have Brad Wall, Premier of the province of Saskatchewan, who said he's openly in favor of abolition. And so what will happen is that I foresee communication and a strategy being put in place once we form government to work with the provinces to find a method of getting rid of the Senate for once and for all. It's important to realize that it wasn't that long ago that some provinces themselves had their own upper chamber, and we no longer see them at all today. It means that it's not an absolute fact that it cannot be changed or modified or abolished. We simply have to make sure we commit ourselves to working towards it.
There was a satellite office controversy, and your party, like NDP, was ordered to pay $2.75 million to the government of Canada. You think it was controversial? You think it was a part of the election, or you still believe that you guys are going to pay back this one?
So it most certainly was controversial. It was controversial because the Liberals and Conservatives on that particular committee changed the rules of how money was spent. So imagine yourself and myself, Baji, we're sitting down and playing a game of Monopoly. And then partway through the game, once you've made a whole series of moves and decisions, I come and I change the rules on you. That is certainly not fair, and certainly you would expect to be caught in a difficult situation if that's the case. This is effectively the exact same thing that the Conservatives and the Liberals have done to us. They know that we have spent the money properly under the rules as they existed at the time, but they did not want us becoming stronger because they realize that Canadians are listening more to us, and so they changed the rules so that they're able to try to catch us in this type of situation. Paji, I can tell you frankly that we will become stronger rather than weaker as a result of this particular issue, and we will take this issue to Canadians so that they can judge us on the facts as they exist.
We all know that from the existing polls or coming polls that there is going to be a tight races in Ontario, and you are going to represent Brampton North. So when it comes to tight races, we already saw some kind of a trend going on. Let's talk about Bill C-51. When Conservatives brought this bill, Liberals were not supporting it, but they end up supporting it, and your party was the one who didn't support it. And we saw how the polls are planning. You think NDP made a right decision to oppose that kind of a bill which brought the polls up?
So, Paji, first and foremost, the most important thing is that the support or lack of support, as the case may be, of a political party for a certain bill should not be based on polls alone. We oppose Bill C-51 because it's wrong for Canada. When that bill was first proposed, Tom Mulcair and the federal NDP opposed it right from the very beginning. It's important to note that there was a very high support rate at that time among Canadians for that bill because they really did not know what was contained in it. Once they started to learn what was contained in that bill, they realized that, in fact, our safety and security would not be improved by that particular bill, but our privacy and freedoms would certainly be going into decline. And so what happened as a result of that particular decision, and also the decision of the Liberals to support it each and every single time, and it's important to realize that they voted in favor of it 3 successive times in the House of Commons, that Canadians are realizing that it is the New Democratic Party that is the party that exclusively and only protects their rights and freedoms. And we're seeing that on the doorstep. There are people from all different backgrounds coming forward and saying, we are concerned about Bill C-51, we don't like what it's doing to our country, and we feel it's un-Canadian. And it is as a result of that that the New Democratic Party is gaining in support.
But when it comes to the serious issue like fighting against terrorism, you think it is fair for the government to compromise some of these policies or some of those issues? You mentioned that you can compromise some of civil rights when it is a serious issue you are dealing with to fight against the terrorism?
You know, it's difficult to speak on the hypothetical, but I can speak about the following. We did have some unfortunate incidents where 2 of our Canadian Armed Forces members were struck down in the line of duty. And what we want to make sure is that they and all Canadians have the highest level of safety as possible. The difficulty that we have with Bill C-51 and other bills brought forward by the Conservative government is that while the freedoms and personal privacy is reduced, the security is not in fact increased. At that parliamentary committee meeting that they had when they were discussing this particular bill, we know that there were 4 separate individual prime ministers who all came forward and individually said that this particular bill will not improve security and will severely reduce freedoms and personal privacy. And I might also add that one of those former prime ministers included a Conservative prime minister. And so what it is that the line that's being fed to us by the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party in Canada is false. We have to recognize it as that, and the New Democratic Party will continue to fight for the rights and freedoms of Canadians.
You said as the opposition you guys will oppose this bill, but let's say after October 19th you guys form the government, what you will do to this bill? Will challenge in the Supreme Court, or you will abolish this bill?
No, the bill will be struck down. It will be gotten rid of, 100%.
It will be struck down?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there won't be any politics played that we will think about it or we will do that. As long as you guys form the government, you will start this bill.
No, I think that it's the Liberal Party, Paji, that's playing the politics with that particular one. The New Democratic Party has been very clear on this from the get-go, from the very beginning, to say that, when we form power on October 19th, Bill C-51 will be gotten rid of.
But this is very interesting, as you mentioned that the Liberal Party is playing the politics, but I want to remind you that your leader last week mentioned that he wants to form a coalition or want to merge with the Liberal Party. So, but the outright fact is the Justin Trudeau Liberal Party leader outrightly denied it, and they say they will not form any kind of merger, coalition, or any kind of understanding with NDP. So if NDP party is against Liberals, why are you sending these kind of message that you can have an understanding or you can have a merger or coalition with the Liberal Party?
It's important that we make sure we get the wording correct in your question there, Paji. You said that the NDP wanted a coalition with the Liberal Party. I'm not so sure that the word wanted was the word that was actually used. I would argue that the word that was used was open, meaning the New Democratic Party was open, depending on the will of Canadians and how many MPs are elected, we would be open to having a coalition with the Liberal Party, assuming that they are working in the interest of Canadians. What we have to do first, though, is that we have to, first see what the will of Canadians is. We have to see how many members of Parliament they decide to elect. It is important for both you and I, Paji, not to dismiss the will of Canadians before they even have a chance to vote, and to try to use our crystal ball to determine what the outcome of any federal election may be.
But when it came to, we can look at the history, your former leader, Jack Layton, Stephen Dion, they did have that kind of understanding, but that time, who was going to be the Prime Minister was going to be the Liberal Party leader because they were running ahead of poll. This time, this is a different story because your leader is running ahead of poll, so Justin Trudeau don't have a chance to become a Prime Minister by these kind of a merger. Is there any backroom deals that are going on that we don't know?
I'm not at all familiar with anything going on there. I can tell you that the focus currently for me is working in my riding to get my constituents to come out and vote and support the policies of the New Democratic Party. To that end, we have recently opened our office at 2250 Beauvais Drive East, and we are canvassing 7 days a week. We've had a fantastic response at the doorstep, and people are very interested in seeing change. This is what we will continue to do from now until Election Day to make sure that we share our vision of Canada, the positive and optimistic and hopeful vision of Canada that the New Democratic Party advocates, so that the people of Brampton North and right across Canada have a real option for change and that they are ready for change on October 19th.
So when you're running for for Parliament seat in Brampton North, must be the Indo-Canadian riding. How tough it is to campaign or represent the Indo-Canadian riding?
First and foremost is that people from all different backgrounds are interested in some similar items. They want to make sure that they're able to find jobs, to be able to earn money and pay for the things that they need to raise their families. They want to make sure that their children have opportunities, and sometimes opportunities more than what they had if they're brand new to the country. In addition to that, they want to make sure that their cost of living is not so high that they always feel that they're struggling or just working to survive. These are the issues that we try to tackle in the New Democratic Party. Whether it's people from the Indo-Canadian background or all the other backgrounds, we want to make sure that we build alliances between the communities so that we can find solutions that work for all Canadians.
Are you running on just the party policies, or you do have your individual policies you want to tell your constituents that I'll do this, I'll convince my party, or I'll convince the coming government to do something for your own riding?
Well, the thing is this, Budgie, is that the New Democratic Party is strong because they do focus on local issues through sound and intelligent implementation of federal policy. We talked about the child care program, $15 a day. Certainly it's applied to the entire nation, but it has a very strong benefit in Brampton as my riding and also the entire city. In addition to that, the gas tax, redistribution coming back to the municipalities, again, benefits municipalities right across the country. Also, too, it has a strong benefit in the GTA and Brampton area where I am running to become the Member of Parliament. Also, too, there are other policies that don't get quite as much press, but are certainly very important. As an example, in my riding, Brampton Civic Hospital, the folks there who are working try their very best to do the best job possible, but they still have challenges in delivering the best quality of health care for the people who need it in the city of Brampton. The Conservative Party has chosen, even though they recognize those challenges, they've chosen to try to cut $36 billion of healthcare transfers from Ottawa to the provinces. And so if we have challenges with our healthcare system already, you can imagine how big the challenges will be once those cuts are implemented. The Democratic Party recognizes that if Canadians don't have their health, then they really don't have anything. And so we see those cuts as being wrong-headed in their approach, and we have to really make sure that we approach the economy in a sensible manner, unlike the Conservatives with their arbitrary cuts to social programs.
We had experiments with the provincial governments when it comes to the NDP forming the government, when you talk about Ontario, BC, Saskatchewan, and mostly economists are saying that those governments were not good for the economy. Now we have a new experiment in Alberta. What do you think, by looking at the background, what the NDP played as a provincially, people are still scared from NDP, or you think federally NDP can do the better job than the former provincial NDP governments?
I think those economists who make those statements are fundamentally flawed. You might remember earlier in this interview, I mentioned to you the Department of Finance's own statistics show that the New Democratic Party has the highest percentage of balanced budgets over any other party that's ever existed in Canada when they've run government. And so if you're looking...
But I want to remind you, the Liberal leader now, Bob Rae, when he was the NDP premier in Ontario, Ontario was in deficit. Still, they are in the deficit, which are at the peak level, and they are blaming the former NDP government for that.
Yeah, I tell you, if you're having budget deficits 25 years after a government, then I suggest that it in fact reflects poorly on the current government. We can't sit back and blame, politicians 25 years ago for policies that they made and saying that it's impacting us right now. We have to act like adults. We have to go to Canadians with proper and sound policies, and we have to take responsibility for our actions. And we do that in the New Democratic Party. And as I mentioned to you, sometimes folks speak of the Ontario government that existed at that time. I come back and I speak about the Saskatchewan government run under Tommy Douglas, which had 17 balanced budgets in a row, while at the same time creating the Medicare system that we care for so much in this country.
We talked to one Conservative MP from Toronto yesterday, and he mentioned that when it comes to like the controversial provincial bill that was the sex education curriculum, they brought it, and he said there was a role for the federal MP to have a statement or something of his vision to say address on that. Are you going to address that? Are you going to support that sex education curriculum or not?
So what's really important to note is that when people are running at the federal level, no matter what their position is, if they're a regular MP, if they're a cabinet minister, or even if they're the prime minister, they do not have the ability to have power over the education system of the provinces. And so if members of parliament or people wanting to be members of parliament are saying to their constituents that they have such power, then they are in fact lying to their constituents. What is important to note, though, is that I have a problem with the process as it was implemented by the Provincial Liberal Party. They did not properly consult the communities involved, and they could have, in fact, taken a much longer time to, learn what the people in Ontario think about the changes that were brought into place before they implemented them. And so I take issue with the process, and I think that they would have had a much better income if they consulted, with all Ontarians before, implementing that particular change. But again, it's important to note, any person running in this federal election, if they claim to be able to have power over making changes to that education system, are telling falsehoods and lies to the public and to their voters. And so we have to make sure that, people don't get away with that.
When it comes to some controversial bills like assisted suicide or abortion bill, they were stuck in the Supreme Court. What will your government do? You guys will bring them back for the debate or not?
Baji, these issues were settled back in the 1980s. I don't think we're going to be interested in resuscitating issues from 30 and 40 years ago. The Canadian public has made its decision on that one, and we can leave it as it is.
Okay, tell us something about the immigration policies, which normally the ethnic communities are interested to know from the federal parties. How different policies will be from your party compared to Conservative Party of Canada and also the Liberal Party too?
So what it is, Pudgy, is that the New Democratic Party has a firm commitment to family reunification. We've been exercising a family reunification petition for, I think it's approximately the last 2 years now. And this petition was designed to get signatures from people all across Canada who feel that the current Conservative government has turned our immigration system into an absolute disaster. If I'm not mistaken, for spousal class immigrants coming from India, I think the wait time is at least at 18 months and may even be as long as 2 years. This is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there used to be a time when you could have your spouse join you in 3 to 4 months. And so we look forward to the New Democratic Party implementing a policy that is very much fair, just, and time efficient so our members of our family can come together. In addition to that, the Conservative Party does not value, the role that our senior members of our community play. They see our senior members as being a drag on the economy and our healthcare system, whereas we know in many of the communities across Canada, these folks are hugely important for transferring knowledge of both faith, culture, and community, but also, too, they serve in a very important childcare role so that younger people in our communities can go out to work and earn the money that they need to support their families. And so we see a fundamental difference here between the New Democratic Party and the Conservative Party in that the New Democratic Party supports fair and timely immigration policies in Canada. What's interesting too, Paji, is that we talk a lot about immigration, but we don't talk a whole lot about visas. The visa system, while it doesn't get as much media, has also been messed up very badly by the Conservative Party to the point now where it's almost unmanageable. The visa system has to be changed so that people are able to travel to this great country, to visit, spend their money here, and enjoy their time here with their families. What we see is we see people in our communities who are doing a very good job of planning weddings and whatnot, whereby they apply for their visas 6 months in advance, 12 months in advance, even 18 months in advance, only to see themselves be refused at the very last minute when they don't have time to file an appeal. And they miss these very important occasions in order to be able to come and spend time with their loved ones. And these occasions won't come twice because, of course, once someone's married, then they've been married. In addition to that, we have many people who want to bring their parents over, not necessarily to immigrate, but just to visit and participate in the raising of their children. And these parents are not being allowed to participate in the visa program as well, and it's an absolute tragedy and must be changed.
So when it comes to coming for the weddings, what you guys will do differently? Will you allow everyone to come for the wedding ceremonies? That's what you meant?
Paji, we can't speak hypothetical on each individual wedding. What we're looking at doing is taking the system as it currently exists, which arbitrarily refuses people for no clear reason and in a very unfair manner, and implement a system that is fair and efficient so that those people who want to come to Canada, enjoy our great country, spend their money here, and spend time with their families at important occasions are able to do so.
Okay, when it comes to, let's say, another bill which they introduced lately, which was the income, they were allowing the Canadians to use the income splitting so they can save some taxes. Liberal Party had a clear stand on that. They will start that bill. What will be the stand of your party?
Well, clearly what we want to do, especially with monetary bills, bills dealing with money, is that we want to make sure that it benefits as many Canadians as possible. What we know is that the Conservative Party has an eye to just supporting the most wealthy in our country. We think that that is not the correct approach. We want to make sure that we implement policies that benefit as many Canadians as possible. And so to draw a contrast, we know that the income splitting bill does not benefit the majority of Canadians. In fact, it's only a very small group that it benefits. But the improvement in the UCCB or child benefit, we see that as being an intelligent policy, and in fact we would support it. The reason why we support it is that those people who are of lower income are able to keep the overwhelming majority of that money because they benefit from it and they're entitled to it, while as those people in the upper income brackets would have that money taxed back as they should because they no longer need it. And so this is the type of approach that the Democratic Party would take to make sure that families who are struggling and want to remain in the middle class are able to do so, while those who are well off do not get a free ride and more money from the government that they just don't need.
People are fearful from the NDP government, especially when it comes to forming a government at the federal level. People say that NDP is more for spending and more for taxes to the Canadians. How you will convince them that NDP is not for just spending and not for raising the taxes?
Well, let's draw on two of the policies or rather a policy in a situation that I mentioned previously. One, we look at the small business tax rate, which we're looking to reduce from 11% down to 9%. That is in fact a tax reduction. And not only are we advocating for it at the federal level, in fact, if we look at the provincial government in Manitoba that is in power, if I remember correctly, they've reduced the small business tax rate in that particular province down to 0. And so what we see is a new Democratic Party that is in fact reducing taxes, not arbitrarily to benefit the rich, but to work towards job creation for all Canadians. And so the tax cuts as they exist must be done to benefit as many Canadians as possible, and that's the NDP's approach. In addition to that, in my riding, I don't hear that people are fearful of the new Democratic Party. In fact, I hear people who can't wait until the Democratic Party is elected so that we can get a government in place that manages the economy better while making sure that they're concerned with the cost of living that all Canadians face.
At a local level, who's your main competitor? Is it a Liberal Party candidate or Conservative Party of Canada candidate?
We show respect to all of our opponents equally. Our job in the local riding association and through the campaign is to make sure that we give voters the choice. And we give voters that choice by making sure that we share our information as widely as possible so everybody can read about the program that we have and learn about that program and ask us questions about it. In addition to that, we canvass 7 days a week so we get out there and meet the maximum number of people possible. Also too, Paji, what we do is we've already have our office open, even though the election has not even been called yet. And what this means is that people are able to come and interact with me personally and other members of my staff so that they can learn about NDP policies. So what it is not so much defining who our main opponent is. We respect them all equally, and we disagree from a policy perspective vigorously with their vision of Canada as opposed to ours. But our focus is really on the voters and making sure that they understand that they have a choice on October 19th in the next federal election.
There is speculation that elections will be called on August 2nd. How you will rate this if Prime Minister comes on August 2nd and declare the elections.
Are
you ready for that?
Yeah, we are ready in Brampton North already. Our office is open, our staff is in place. Our signs have been ordered and will be delivered by that date. We are ready to go. The New Democratic Party in Brampton North is ready for election whenever it comes.
I forgot to ask you about one important policies I want to ask you before we finish this. That's the environmental policies, which NDP boasts that they can play an important role. Tell us something about the policies related to environmental which your party want to share with us.
The New Democratic Party has a consistent record of being in support of environmental policies. Tom Mulcair in particular is very, very strong on this issue. Paji, you might remember that when he was a cabinet minister at the provincial level in the Quebec government, he actually quit cabinet on a point of principle because the premier at the time wanted to break the province's own law to allow companies to violate environmental policies and build in a park. And so this is just one example of how the New Democratic Party is committed to ensuring that the environment is protected for all of our children, grandchildren, and the next coming generations. But beyond that also, we see in the New Democratic Party that there's an opportunity for a green economy, meaning that we have to jump on board with those people making innovations in environmental policy and environmental industries so that Canada is not left behind. And this is part of our economical diversification that does not focus only and exclusively on oil and gas, as is the case with the Conservative Party, but really reaches out very broadly to say there are many other options out there, including green economy options that can be used to create jobs in Canada and make our environment a much better place in which we live.
But as the opposition leader, Mr. Tom Mulcair went to the United States, tried to convince them to oppose the Keystone Pipeline. If you guys are against the pipelines, how will do the business? Economy is down, we can't ship our oil. So what your party is saying that, okay, we will do better job in environment, but you guys will hurt the business. How you will say about that?
There are many different options there for shipping the oil, as you know, Paji. I mean, why would we ship jobs south of the border when we can keep them right here at home? It doesn't make any sense. We have options around refining that oil from the synthetic crude oil product that it is currently to higher value products and then exporting those products. It's also important to realize, I believe it's actually today, that we've come to learn that the Alberta Premier, New Democratic Party Premier, is in fact herself not going to advocate to the U.S. government to approve Keystone because she, I believe, recognizes that there's a diversification and a job creation process that can happen locally right here at home in Canada and keep our products at home and manufacture them here rather than ship them across the border only to be shipped back at a higher price. And so I am supremely confident in the Democratic's policy and process on these particular issues, and I think it's the right one for all Canadians.
If NDP formed the government, who you want to see the opposition, Conservative Party or Liberal Party?
That is not for me to decide, Paji. It's up to Canadians who they want to see in their government and also on the opposition benches. I leave it to them to decide on October 19th in the next federal election.
At the end, what do you want to say to our listeners or the constituents of your riding? What message you want to give it to them?
I'd like to share with the residents of Brampton North, all Ontarians and Canadians from coast to coast to coast, that the New Democratic Party is putting together an absolutely fantastic team of people who, from all different backgrounds, very diverse backgrounds, who have the skills and ability to form a fantastic government and change the direction of Canada to be more positive, optimistic, and hopeful. Locally, in our area, we are working very hard to reach out to all members of all communities in our riding. We are having our office open now 7 days a week. We are canvassing 7 days a week, and the outreach is going very well. Please come and join us. You can reach us on our website, www.martinsingh.ca, or alternatively, you can call our office 905-595-5122, or alternatively, you can come in and visit us directly, 2250 Beauvais Drive East. We're on the ground floor to make sure it's accessible for each and everyone who wants to come and volunteer with our campaign.
Mr. Singh, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you the luck.
Likewise, Baji, thank you so much for the opportunity. Sat Sri Akal.